In this video, I start my SSF journey with one of the best clear speed builds in the game, Kinetic Blast of Clustering Elementalist. Shout out to Palsteron for providing me with much of the tech I'll be using to make this build work later on, but with some twists of my own of course, and it's solo self-found so you never know what you're gonna get. I start off the build as a humble witch wielding only my basic fireball on the beach. It's enough to burn Hillock down and get my first skill on my wander journey, which is going to be Kinetic Bolt. I combine Kinetic Bolt in the early game with Volley and Flame Wall to create a nice little combo that both hits hard and cleans up enemies with damage over time. I take down the Dweller to get the skill point, and then I pick up an Essence and make my way to Brutus. I safely kite him back and forth while he throws a tantrum and slams the ground in frustration. I decide I'm going to check out Mercenaries while I level and find one with a Screaming Eagle. Not useful for my build, but I can always weapon swap it in town to move faster if I want. Fairgrave returns from the grave only to die immediately, and I find my first allied mercenary shortly thereafter in the Cavern of Wrath. The mercenaries I'm picking in early game are all going to be projectile based, so they can get the extra damage of having their projectiles go through my flame wall as well. I decided to try Locust Mine Power Siphon and use it on Merveil, but decided pretty shortly after that I didn't really like it much and just went back to attacking myself. My Merc is squishy, but with aggressive recalls I actually can keep him dying to the Fishwife, and I end up heading into Act 2. In the Chamber of Sins, I find the first of 3 tabula rasa I find from mercenaries in my first 8 hours of the league. That's right, I find 3 tabulas from random mercs before hitting yellow maps. 2 of them are in the campaign as well. This is going to be a huge power surge, although I'm basically on a 2-link now because I dropped the Locust Mines, but we're going to fix that very shortly. Fidelitas goes down to my mighty 2-link and I pick up a new merc to benefit from its poacher's mark. We kill the Weaver in pretty short order, the new 6-linked Power Siphon really doing a lot of work. I check out the Broken Bridge Exiles to look for move speed boots and jewelry, but I get no meaningful upgrades. I actually didn't get any movement speed boots in this run until I got the craft after Oversoul. This is only the second time I've ever had this happen to me. Speaking of Oversoul, the fight is pretty straightforward as long as I don't get crushed by falling rocks, and we're now able to enter Act 3. We find Piety doing some good old-fashioned torture and scare her off to loot her victim. I shortly after that find a crazy belt in Act 3 with very high life and high double resist from a merc. Mercs are really paying off. It's even got some strength, not bad at all. I get the shortest docks layout I've ever seen with the entrance to the zone still visible on the minimap as I pick up the quest item. I get a new merc, my first one with an aura, in this case Grace. Soon after that, a ghosted Cole gives me my first death of the league. Apparently he didn't like being ignored and followed me halfway across the map just to kill me while I briefly looked away from the screen. I do get my revenge though. Should have kept well enough alone, big guy. Now I'm messing around with Spellslinger at Piety, trying Eye of Winter. I figure the Eye of Winter can also pass through the flame wall and get a bunch of fire damage that way. It feels okay, but it's not really my style. I'm gonna try a bunch of different Spellslinger spells in order to try to figure out what I want to do, but I do end up using Eye of Winter for a little bit. I'm actually still using it when I fight Dominus. The fight goes okay, but my lack of physical mitigation almost gets me stunned to death once or twice. I decide to kill Vol before I do labs so I can grab my golems before I get my Ascendancy. That way I can get right up to 3 golems and then 4 golems shortly afterwards, and that'll make my life a lot easier, starting to get pretty much any portion of the build really going. I spec'd out of my dual wielding nodes, realizing that I probably should be running shield charge and I could use the extra tankiness, and honestly I probably should have been doing that all along, but those dual wield nodes looked really juicy. Azaro's easy enough as he's in his 2-handed slow form and I'm chilling him so he can't really touch me. I'm able to ascend to Elementalist and finally get to use my golems. One thing I didn't really like about the golems is that if you move your gear around, it'll end up desummoning them, so you have to figure out which ones you're missing out of the 4 and get it resummoned. I wish it was a little easier to keep track of. I can't really keep track of them on my screen or my buff bar very easily. I would often forget and notice I only have 1 or 2 of my golems, which ended up nerfing me a ton at various portions of the game, but I managed to kind of get the swing of it and get used to resummoning the ones when I take the gems out of their sockets. It's not a huge deal, but as a simple strike enjoyer, I really am not used to running into this kind of problem. In the mines, I find a mercenary with anger and decide I could use the damage boost more than evasion and take him with me despite his disturbing comments, of which he makes many. Unfortunately, I accidentally failed to record the rest of Act 4 and all of Act 5, so we're gonna have a bit of a time jump. The only things of note that I can remember is I got an Ascent from Flesh Belt, which was a nice defensive boost that would sometimes give me phasing and some bonuses from that as well. I also got a really good pair of gloves from a merc that I used for most of the rest of the campaign, which had around 130 life and 2 resist over 30%, along with flat damage, and I crafted some attack speed on top of that. But other than that, that's pretty much it. So we cruise into the Brine King and nearly die a few times as we're not capped on cold res yet. Then we head straight into Act 7 and take down Malagaro for the Black Venom. Groost is next, and goes down without much of a fight. Gruthkul also dies almost immediately, then drops a Perkle's Toe to put on our Merc, giving us lucky damage for now on, which is absolutely huge. In the Causeway, we find a second Tabula Rasa from Merc so far this run, and it won't be the last. This has got to be one of my luckiest SSF runs of all time, and I haven't even cracked the top 3 luckiest drops yet I've gotten at this point, but I'll get to one of those very shortly here. I also got a small cluster jewel with flexible sentries shortly after that. It's going to help me greatly later when I want to sort out my ailments and defenses. A merc in the Temple of Decay has a helmet, which is literally just a 1-for-1 upgrade of what I'm wearing. The only reason Arakali survives more than 3 seconds is because she runs away and hides for a bit, but that doesn't save her for long. In Act 8, I get my second Ascendancy right away and pick up Shaper of Storms for huge shocks. On Dwayre, you can see my shocks that were around 5% on bosses before, now are hitting about 27%, and it's only going to climb from there. In the Grain Gate, I find an underground passage I had completely forgotten about that connects it with the Bathhouse and Solaris Concourse, which gives us nice little shortcuts. I'm not actually sure if it's any shorter, to be honest, but it is pretty dense with rares at least. In the Solaris Temple, I find a Voidborn Reliquary Key, the first ting of the run. This is actually the first time I found one in the campaign, and I was completely shocked. I'll be holding on to that one for a little while and open it up later on, of course. I take down Yugal for the skill point, then I go for the Sisters. On my way, I find a pretty cracked rarity ring with 26% rarity and high life and resist value from a merc, with space for a slam and craft possibly as well. So I take Blood Whirl pretty happily and slide it in for more drops. I take down Dusk and Dawn presumably too, but the fights look identical, so there's not really any need to show both. Solaris and Lunaris are next on the chopping block, and you can really see the power of having a 6-link, 100% crit chance, and then 80% free crit multi with a ton of flat damage sources at work here. They go down pretty much as fast as they pop up, and our little game of whack-a-mole quickly comes to an end. I find a killer attribute resist flat fizz amulet shortly after reaching Act 9. Merc drops are really crazy sometimes, especially in a fresh solo self-found environment. I've never been this geared early on before, it's really nuts. We are now boss rushing, so we got Shakira, Medusa, Bird Person, and the Proto Merc all down in quick succession, leading up to the Depraved Trinity, which ends up pretty anticlimactic, honestly. In the control blocks in Act 10, I find yet another killer ring. This time it's an amethyst ring, even better, with good flat fizz, all res, and very high cold res. I can't stress enough how nuts mercs are in solo self-found. If you aren't trying solo self-found yet, go give it a shot. Valenta is no problem for the skill point, but Avarius doesn't want us to get away too easily and reminds me that I'm mortal and stupid, as I Frostblink right into his attack and get one tap. I do take him down though and get my third Ascendancy, Shaper of Winter, shortly thereafter. I also get something I wasn't looking for, but changed the direction of this build not too far down the line. For a little context, I had no intention of playing Kinetic Blast of Clustering. I actually wanted to use Power Siphon and Cold Snap of Power Spellslinger, which was pretty stupid because the interaction doesn't work how I had hoped it worked. I never bothered testing it in Trade League, and I probably should have before I went to commit to it, so I'm glad the KB showed up. I end up stashing the gem and coming back to it later. This was a really big find and I didn't even know it at the time. My final gift from the campaign was a little bit of a boot upgrade. Nothing too special, but my boot luck was awful the whole way through, so I was really happy with this. I'll show the whole Kitava fight just as a last send-off to the campaign, but that doesn't mean we're fully done yet. I also wanted to show my first map to give a taste of what's to come. I would also like to show that pretty much immediately right into the first map we get another pretty nutty ring from the map's Merc. What a run. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll leave you with the rest of this map, but I would like to really recommend trying out Solo Self-Found this league if you haven't already, as I think it might be one of the best leagues for it of all time. This has been Ryan from Behind Eyes Gaming, and I will see you next time. Bye.